Ryan Zuercher, CEO and founder of Seeing Digital Media. We're here in Columbus, Ohio, the epicenter of technology development. And our company is focused on helping brands build audience on visual channels. That's primarily Instagram, Twitter evolving for us. So we work with big brands, primarily consumer-facing brands with lifestyle type component to their products. So anything from a Dick's Sporting Goods retailer to a big cupcake manufacturer or Ford doing trade shows, and we help connect them with new audiences, how to build visualization, how to measure, how to engage. And so our software platform helps brands really take that kind of effort to scale.
Are brands becoming more sophisticated in how they treat these platforms?
Slowly, slower than we would like. Most of our job is around educating on possibilities, and then we back into selling our product at that point. They're starting to realize that, this quote omni-channel consumer, that they are responsible for publishing content and in a different way than they were in a traditional advertising world. So that's the slow ramp for them, is breaking down budgets, breaking down the traditions they have, and fitting that all into a new strategy. And marketers are not risk takers, so it's a slow process.
You mentioned Columbus, Ohio at the outset, and I was at the Forbes Summit in March in Chicago, and Ohio was one of the states represented, along with Indiana and Iowa and Michigan, as being states that are really pushing the tech sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we like to, everyone wants to define themselves as the up and coming Silicon Valley, and we really, I guess we're trying to say what we want to be Columbus version 2 versus some other city. One thing about a city like Columbus, which is unique, is that we're like a new city almost. So Cleveland and Cincinnati in Ohio are the old towns, and we're a newer town. So we have Ohio State in the middle of the city. It keeps it pretty young here. But it's primarily a white-collar workforce with, believe it or not, fashion as one of the centerpieces. So all the limited brands, Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie, Merrick, they're all headquartered here. And we have financial services backbone. And so it's an interesting town that has a lot of really good first customers for companies, but not really the dead pool of entrepreneurs of new. So it's slowly evolving. You can trick yourself into thinking you can't do it in places like this, but that's not true. It's easy. It's a nice place to live, and it's a supportive community for sure.
You mentioned attending Big Omaha, and we've certainly been pushing here this notion of Silicon Prairie.
Yep.
I see that also in Chicago, very active. Are there real advantages to being in the Midwest and away from Silicon Valley?
I think there can be. I mean, it's like you got to use all this to your advantage depending on what you're doing. We like to say there is no here. So we try to focus less on it being Columbus and more about just it's a community that we're building. I think the advantage we take advantage of, one, hiring competition. So my competition is Nationwide Insurance and Chase and what we would call boring places. They are stable though, and they have nice 401k plans and benefits. So that's really our competition here, which I think is a benefit. So you want to build an environment. We can hire a little differently. We obviously don't compete with the salaries of Silicon Valley and the cost of living in some places like that. But I think the real advantage is the shorter distance of connections. I mean, I can get connected in a community like Columbus a little bit quicker. I'm not competing on where I went to college or which VCs I know. It's really a very supportive community like that. And so you can, if you want to, you can get things done quickly. I think the main thing for us as a community is we usually we want to ship people out and then bring them back, because that's very helpful for broadening their scope. So for me, I left Columbus for 10 years. I came back. My worldview is quite a bit different than some of the people that have stayed here.
Let's drill down a little bit on Scene.
Yeah.
I was looking at the hashtag World Cup 2014 on the site. What can we learn from Scene?
I think the main thing that we sort of help companies understand is when you're thinking about like the concept of a hashtag. Like to stay away from growing follower counts, things like that, and really thinking about this idea of the always on consumer and where it is to intercept people that is meaningful. So, if you're a brand like Ford, being on Instagram is kind of a thing. You're not selling a car to most people on Instagram. You're selling a lifestyle. You're selling a positioning. They expect a different form of content from brands now. So maybe it's, if you're going to participate in something like the World Cup as a sponsor or be involved in that conversation, is why are you involved in that? What is it that Ford can talk about with someone like me who's not in the market for buying a car? And I think that's what we try to help do, is translate what that means. How do you use statistics to analyze content, success, and engagement? We can find out funny things like, did you know that putting people in a picture gets less engagement than a landscape photo? Did you know that photos with water have better engagement than photos without water? Did you know that high saturation color photos are good because when they're spinning through something on Instagram, you need to have an eye-catching sort of moment there. So for them, it's we try to go deeper than it's just not about Facebook likes anymore. It's about building channels long-term and all these other things that go along with it.
Are we then moving to a higher level of measurement?
If you're going to be good, you're going to need to. The only downside to any kind of quote-unquote social media sort of marketing is that it got, our opinion is that it got labeled with direct response digital ads. So any kind of click-through stuff, that sort of measurement got hooked into social media, which was unfair because no one had measured advertising that way until that happened. So I think there's a reset in a lot of people's minds to a language instead of KPIs that they can work with that are meaningful. So a marketer isn't saying, well, how did Instagram translate to sales? Well, TV didn't translate to sales directly, probably, but this confluence of all these things is helping lift the brand and find the right consumer.
So when I was looking at the hashtag that I was looking at, I saw something called perspectives. What is perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, perspectives, I think, like what we see is helping brands understand who's looking where at what. And so examples we look at is, through which eyes and lens is it that the consumer is coming into the content that they're seeing. So as an example, I think one of the challenges facing the brands today is Instagram has basically said, we're only going to allow companies deliver ads on the network in a way where the content is representative of the brand, but it doesn't have a branded product in there. So you can't have a logo and a photo from an ad. Consumer can only see that ad one time. So if you just put those two constraints around it, you have a huge challenge coming into any of these channels. So knowing who it is you want to deliver things to, what they're coming in at it, where did they come from, why are they coming through, that's really what we think about with perspective, and how do we translate that into a meaningful set of data.
Is there a disagreement or an agreement about what constitutes engagement today?
There's depends on who's going to be successful in telling the story. So an agency may have have the drive to grow the audience, so they're going to talk about follower counts, and they're going to measure that. Whereas we may come in as a campaigns product and say, we're really looking for likes and comments and that type of engagement. So I think there's an argument. I don't think there is a unified front on that at this point, although it'll probably be as sort of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter will have the power to tell people what that should be. Twitter getting bought by buying Gnip, their data provider who we use as well, I think was a step in the right direction for helping us translate to brands and marketers what that language should be. But there's going to be a debate, and it's good for us. The more people are arguing about it, the better it is to have tools for measurement.
With respect to comments, where are we at with this notion of social listening? I mean, I again see some disagreement there that
Yeah.
we should be listening, we shouldn't be listening. How do you come down on that?
Um, it's social listening's a tough one because what's the purpose of it? I think ultimately, we see some companies in the space around visuals talking about, well, we can identify your brand in more content, and that's fine. There's a need for that for some brands. But the ultimate thing is, what am I listening for and why? And I think, when Radiant 6 and Vitru got bought and were integrated into, the Oracle suites and the Salesforce suites, there was, essentially all these other companies scrambling around to say, oh crap, like we're not going to get bought by them anymore. So we have to move from listening, and that went to sentiment analysis, which people would argue that doesn't really work that well, to insights. And so I think a lot of people are saying, help marketers make a quick decision. And that's really where social listening is probably at today, is if you can deliver an actionable item that will help move the needle on something, then that's probably what social listening is. We do not hear from clients very much anymore about just monitoring the brand. I think they know it's an overwhelming world. There's a time and a place for it. So it's tough, and there's a lot of tools. I don't envy a marketer's position for buying or managing this, because I think a lot of them sort of gave up on that side of it and said, well, integrate it into some other part of my marketing where I know I can then be able to make an actionable item. If it's listening, that I find out that the thing that content we're doing, we can optimize better. That's interesting. But the customer service angle on social listening has definitely been good. Twitter has been awesome. I mean, public shaming is the best way to get people's attention, and so I think that's where we see social listening is effective, and most of them that way.
Well, beyond the customer service aspect, is there a connection or a marriage between real time and having a real strategic plan about social?
Yeah, and I think the key in the strategic plan for social for most of these people is stop calling it social, and just start calling it marketing. And then the companies evolve finally to understand that it's all about channel marketing. That happens to be the initial label was social. So I think when we see companies that are talking about channel strategy, we know they're probably moved beyond having a social media team that doesn't integrate into the rest of the marketing and product teams on there. So I think it's getting there. In terms of strategy, we sort of encourage people to do what we do in software building, which is like the 5 whys. Is why are we on Twitter? Why do we care? Why do we do this? Why is this content interesting to our customer? And then they feel more comfortable about putting it into the plan. And dashboarding it like everything else. And so it's slow. And we see that the agency partners are still behind also. And they're oftentimes developing strategy with marketing teams. So as they start to ramp up, I think it'll come together. But strategic, I would say, is probably an aggressive word for most companies. I think they're still pretty reactive. And some of the C-suites kind of like, hey, why? Like, there's a lot of people on Instagram, right? Like, and we're there, right? And if they get a yes and a nod and they know there's an account out there, then they're probably okay. But that's probably not an effective strategy.
Richard Edelman a couple weeks ago made the argument from a PR perspective that we need to flip marketing communications 180 degrees and start talking about communications marketing. And by that he was saying that public relations and relationship building and media relations and all those traditional PR functions have something to say about this new world we're in. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, I think that PR has, like, in a some certain sense, become like a redheaded stepchild to marketing, and a lot of people is like, I don't believe in PR, and that's wrong because it's just a different way of doing it. I would say that I think personally that the agency world should be scared more because the PR firms have a much better opportunity to actually do relationship building than an agency does. And so I think he's right. I think it is about relationships. The consumers have oriented themselves towards believing that Starbucks is a person and that they're going to respond to them. And if that's the case for most brands, if that's the expectation, then it is about how you cultivate and build that relationships. And PR was primarily that, front for many years. We use a PR firm ourselves, and they focus almost exclusively on storytelling. And I think that's what PR firms are really great at doing. But now personalizing that and then delivering that in the right channel there's a lot more places to deliver the message than there was before. So I think he's right. We think Edelman's a really interesting company because they're by far the thought leader. They look more like a true marketing agency to us than a lot of agencies of the past would anymore. So he's a smart guy. I guess I'll take his word. He's probably right.
Is there an ability in social, going beyond the idea of listening, to use the data in ways that help us predict? I mean, you mentioned specifically some things about Instagram. Are we getting to a point where, at least in a loose sense, we develop sort of a theory of social that gives us some predictive ability?
Yeah, I think, none of this is going to be bulletproof like prediction, but I think, the former of just gut instinct, like this will work, and this mystery of the Oracle marketer predicting success doesn't have to be the case. Like we talked about delivering this content into Instagram, and what we want to help marketers do is just do something like gut, and be creative, be inspiring, and then test and iterate, because you can get response measurement and in a scope that's effective enough to make a decision. So if you're going to deliver 1,000 different data points of content over the next 6 months, you can measure the first 10 and start to optimize down the road. And that experimentation, I think, wasn't something that marketers were oriented to doing because it was such a build up to a campaign. You'd have all this creative built, and you'd have this big launch, and then you just sort of sit back and let it all flow in. Now you can really optimize the content, and you can do better prediction on success. The cool thing about social data is that it is you can listen to the crowd to take cues from it. So people were a lot of times listening initially to hear for their brand, versus today where we think it's a good place to go is to listen to get cues to how to actually talk to them. So we look at a brand and we'll say something like, well, okay, Dick's Sporting Goods, by the way, your running fans are sharing photos of post-run, success, or views from their run. How do you incorporate that into the content you're going to share versus worrying if they're talking about Dick's Sporting Goods itself? And I think that's really where that's probably going in terms of prediction, is how do you optimize the right content over time, and knowing full well that there is no full stop. It's just going to keep going, and your brand identity can change quickly on those platforms, and the messaging is necessary. It's not easy. I mean, and I think that's the hardest part for a lot of these brands. Is if I'm a 30-year-old marketer in an agency or brand, I'm really focused on my immediate campaign results, not on what the brand's going to look like over the course of 18 months. Not that I don't care, but I need to serve myself good and capitalize today. So I know it's hard for them to think, well, I don't need to do everything today because we can build this over time. But the time is, that's the hardest thing, is to really sit back and realize that Instagram data is 2.5, 3 years old. Feels like it's 25 years old. Twitter data, while it's longer, meaningful Twitter data for most brands is in its infancy. It's only a couple year old. So the more they can sit back and listen and watch it, then the more accurate their predictive content sharing, whatever it is, can come along. It's tough. We want results now. And the history isn't long enough. The arc of time is so short that I think that's part of the challenge for them.
Are there any lessons then for individuals dealing with their personal brand?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, we always say, "Oh, good thing that didn't exist 10 years ago when I was in college," because boy, would there be all this stuff. And I think that maybe that's true. It doesn't really matter, I guess, anymore. But I think it's similar to a brand. Is if you're going to brand yourself, if you're going to have a persona on these networks, you can make a personal choice about being deliberate or not about it. So maybe you know that in your field, having a voice on Twitter is going to be important to be sharing content and ideas and things. So, like for me personally, like I don't really have a super deliberate channel strategy for myself, but I definitely know I orient myself towards like a LinkedIn, and I share there because it's professionally helpful for me. Facebook's like my personal Rolodex. I just, that's how I know I can, if I have to find somebody, I can find them there. So I think that's definitely helpful to just kind of know what you're trying to get across. We have many friends and partners and colleagues who have built careers and got themselves noticed on those channels. So it can be really effective. We try to focus on the positive side of it, what you can enable and opportunity versus worrying about whether or not someone is going to post something ridiculous on there, because I think that's easy. That's easy media hype, but there's more positive momentum for people to connect on these channels. And feeling okay to be private. I think that's the other thing that if I was talking about, it doesn't bother me as a business owner or a potential recruiter of someone if they said, yeah, I'm private, I don't want to share, I don't care to share, or I don't want other people to. Great. I think that's great personal choice and respectful either direction.
Going back to when you were stepping out of school into the world that it was then, are there key moments or life lessons that really help you today in this environment?
Yeah, it's crazy that since undergrad for me, it's been 12 years, and it feels like the world's changed a lot. I remember the first job I had was formal job out of GE, and they had this really cool internal chat system they launched like right after we got there, and that was like groundbreaking that you could have this instant communication across the globe with everyone. I think the thing that was a key lesson for me, when I left there, I ended up going to a consumer products company where I was way over my skis. I really had never been a product manager, but I think they saw GE on the resume. They were like, oh, he's probably not an idiot, so we'll take him. And I was cheaper than everybody else. So, but what happened for me was I had to become acutely like aware of everything around me. And so I was just really overly aware and learning and sensing and what's going on. I was in China, and it was very crazy to like be building manufacturing there, and I didn't know any Mandarin, and I didn't know where I was half the time. So I think that self-awareness to know was really helpful for me, because I had to call on a lot of people to help me. And so we try to encourage that with our partners with the company too, which is like, it's okay to not know, to say, I don't know. and that's really hard to do. And I know the guys at Freakonomics Publishers, Levitt, and those guys talk a lot about this concept of just saying, I don't know, and understanding like the benefits of failure. And I think for me, that's been the thing that I've been good at, is saying I don't know, and hopefully surrounding myself with really smart people to figure out whatever answers. And I think that's key in this world too, with it's evolving. It's like it's okay, say I don't know, test, learn, find out. Most things that fail don't cripple the world, so it's okay.
Is it too dangerous to make predictions about where we'll be 5 years from now?
It's fun, but I don't know that it's too dangerous. We try to stay out of the prediction business, but we do like to talk about our wish list of things, which I think at the top of our wish list here is this unified identification of a consumer, and so we like to see all these different channels become more effective if we know that my email is tied to my Instagram account. Like we can make this connection about who a consumer is. I think that that'll help sort out how to deliver messaging and content at the right time, at the right place, so that a brand that is something like Ford, who's going to put TV ads and just digital ads in general, and then have presence, that they feel like they're not oversaturating and just guessing. That would be our predict. We would love to have that world live where we can open up a client engagement and say, we can unify this data together, and you're not hitting Jeremy up with both email ads and an Instagram and Twitter ad, because you're delivering to him at the right one at the right time. That would be awesome. Other than that, we're like really curious to know like which next major social network will come out that is going to be interesting for consumers to consume. I think it's been interesting to see all these sort of disposable networks like Snapchat, where like there's not really a great way for a lot of brands to find participation. So who knows? That's kind of the cool thing, is I think the Moore's law of like things is applied to like what happens and what evolves. I think the one thing I can say with some certainty, and I hope it's right, is that Twitter and Facebook and these things they're not going away. They're very involved involved. They will own the channels. They are the new ones. And if you look at Facebook's acquisition history, they pretty much are only concerned with time on device. So they're buying up many things that have Instagram, WhatsApp. That's time on device. That is what they're concerned with now. So I think that's helpful for finding the prediction is, hopefully we'll go to the moon and Elon Musk will make the time travel happen, or, Teslas will fly or something. I mean, that'd be also cool, but we'll just stick with hopefully we can unify email to Instagram and we'll think that'd be cool.
I hear you saying that Scene has a vision for more precision.
Yeah, I think so. And if marketers are going to find scale in any of this, they're going to have to be more precise, because otherwise it's too overwhelming. There's too many places to go and participate in content to create. So I think that is part of what we all will expect as well, is to have that kind of precision. And it's just more effective advertising. It's better for consumers if it's more precise. So we talked a little about the data, the confluence of all of this. I think once we're able to pull the IT department into the marketing department a little closer, expose the data better, it's good for everyone.
Two trends that I wanted to hit on before we run out of time. Sure. I hear in some circles that some of these functions are coming back in-house at companies. Yeah. And at the same time, I hear big firms saying, we might do one aspect of the work, another firm is doing another aspect. How does Scene approach all of this?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely both things happening simultaneously, for sure. We are both a direct partner with some clients and then a supplemental piece to an agency or other parts of the marketing workflow. I'll tell you, like, I don't know where we fit in other than we are experts of a specific type of content and a specific type of marketing. So that's how we fit in, is wherever that conversation needs to be had, we try to be in that room and helping whoever has. It is definitely unique in the sense that we've had to act a little more like a services company in our sales approach and the way we do business. Although we're not an agency, we don't do creative work, but we're being asked to do that sometimes now. So we personally have to make a decision of what does this look like. And I relate a lot of our evolution towards like a buddy media who was sitting around and they were building Facebook applications, but then no one knew how to activate and build out the channel, so they were asked to do services as well. Salesforce didn't like that. They buy them and they shattered off all the services part of that. But to build the bridge to the island of education, that's why you hear this in-house, out-house. We don't have enough people that are educated. We don't want to own the expert, but we want to use the expert. So we fit in there for sure. I think it's definitely the good news for us is that we're a high-margin type of player in the agency world. So to an agency, we look like a product company. To a product company, we look like a services company. So it's tough, I think, for these marketers to decide. It's weird. I don't know why, but it feels like everyone talks about IT outsourcing, but marketing is probably the most outsourced thing in business. There's not a lot of companies that do a huge amount of in-house marketing overall. And so I think you'll see the difference will be that the quote-unquote social media manager job will not be titled that anymore. It'll be a lot more around the traditional marketing person who happens to have responsibility over that channel. And for us, it opens up the opportunity to become in as the expert to content strategy and something like that. So definitely happening. It's going to be good for the consolidation of agencies. They go in this cycle all the time, and I think marketers are feeling the same pain. I think the hardest part is how the reason the trend happens at that level. To not make too long-winded of an answer here, but the budgets are changing a ton. So if marketing has hands on its IT presence more and there's more money on that side of it, you'll see those departments grow and be a little more technical in flavor, I think. And that's just, you follow the money and you'll see that's how the departments grow.
Do you have an example or two that you might make in a pitch of some of your top success stories in the last 12 to 18 months, things that really demonstrate what you're able to do at Scene?
Yeah, I think one of our favorite ones is our engagement we did with Hershey's. So they were launching a holiday product. It was exclusively sold at Target. It was a chocolate candy thing. And interesting to us was that they don't have a presence on Instagram. They actually don't even have an account on there, which is kind of a weird one for a brand that says as visual as a Hershey's could be. But they really wanted to bring to life the use of the product. And so, we built an engagement with a bunch of consumers where they inspired the opportunity to share baking, share gifting, just the candy. And they sold out of the stores really quickly. No way to make full attribution to this, but I think it was their realization that spreading the content out, inspiring consumers to share on behalf of the brand was more effective than them producing and distributing a lot of content on their own. And we were able to measure that success. So we could see all the engagement, the likes, the comments that were going on. And I think the coolest takeaway that we had was, invest in that program, not necessarily for the short-term win, which they got, but actually for next year. So this year they'll do a national rollout. And we were able to say to them, hey, by the way, content was cool, sold the stores, all this was great, but by the way, we noticed that the highest rate of engagement was on images that were shared that included Elf on the Shelf. Also ones that included this type of baking good. So they can make a really positive association for this coming year's marketing efforts to build that type of content. So very cool way for them, a company who doesn't have the presence there, they're not looking to build it out even at this point, but realizes that with inspiring the consumers to do something in that channel, they were able to get their messaging in and out. So that's definitely a cool one for us. It's an exciting one to watch the brands think about the earned media side of things and how that's really a big deal for them, and they can find scale that way.
And brands seem to be more comfortable today with the idea of the consumer as part of their workforce in this process.
Yeah, and they should be. I mean, they're never going to be able to get out there. I mean, it's and I think we kind of talked about this positive association with social media. I think that's also where if a brand can get comfortable to realize that take the attorneys out of the mix for a minute. Most people that are engaging with your brand are going to engage in a positive way with that. And so if you can inspire them to create a moment that's very cool for them, that can go a long way, versus being defensive about, wow, we don't want consumers talking about this or that. We see it, they're definitely employing the consumers in that way and inspiring them to share about the brand and sell the brand for them. And I think it's good. I think it's cool. I personally like it because I think it's awesome to be able to have a relationship, you feel like, with your favorite brands. I mean, that's fun. That's true, like Simon Sinek, why people love Apple stuff, and I think that's fun. I think people want to. They want to believe that there is someone behind that brand actually like thinking about it.
Well, super. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or I haven't asked you about that you think is important to add that we should mention now?
No, I don't think so. I think we try to always kind of leave off everything with think big and creative and build new stuff and cool stuff, and that's our motto, is just we want to do everything that we would ever want to have had. We want to build Willy Wonka, and the chocolate factory out of marketing. That seems cool, and that's the world we want to live in. So we'll try to do that.
There was one more thing that I wanted to come back to, and it's just come back to me. So you were mentioning the lawyers a minute ago, and that brought me back to the beginning. You mentioned the potential regulation, the guidelines. Certainly, the FTC has started to look at all of this. Mm-hmm. Are we not sort of out of the woods there yet in terms of developing best practices for marketing?
Oh, no, not at all. I think better now than before is, I think there's a lot of unwritten practices and just etiquettes that are being followed. I support the FTC's approach, though. They don't rush to judgment on things. I think they're very smart about the way they put out their things. But there's been a recent writing from them about the use of mentions of paid promotional stuff in hashtag-based content, sort of Twitter and Instagram. And we sort of err on the side of caution with our clients if we're ever working with something, and you sort of do the smell test. You're like, okay, does this not seem right? And if we have to ask that question, then we shouldn't feel comfortable with it. I don't think we're out of the woods, but I think the more that the marketers do things, the more comfortable the attorneys get with it, and they realize that it's not going to be the end of the world. The requirements it's a different world to play in, and all this. So it's growing. I think if you're an attorney, you could probably develop an entire practice around like social media law, if you will, which is basically writing terms and conditions. But I would recommend. I don't think we're out of the woods, but I think it gets a little overplayed by the media that people are stealing content or all this other things. I don't think it's that crazy.